We've had my next guest, of course, this is the Centric Health Hour, Dr. Bridge Bomby of Centric Health, and he has been at my side as we have dealt with this pandemic. And it seems to me we're in a situation now where, and you can see it in all our behavior, my behavior too, there's a tendency, and I think we feel a momentum of things are getting better quickly. We are getting bolder in the way that we move. Maybe we leave the mask in the car. We didn't mean to. Maybe we're going out to eat a little bit more often. Things certainly look better both here in Kern County and in California, but it's a tale of two cities because we have parts of the world that are on fire. And let's not forget that this virus will not be beaten county by county. It's going to be a global effort. What we do, this is the lesson of the small world, folks, that unless India gets its business together, we're never going to be totally safe. We need a global campaign to eradicate this virus so we don't get these variants build up. So we'll be talking to these guys about that. When I use these guys, we have another guest, and Dr. Bomby has been bringing some remarkable people on. Today's guest is Dr. Frank Litvak, and he is a friend of Dr. Bomby's for a long time. He used to be head of the cath lab at Cedars, and now he's a healthcare entrepreneur. So I'd like to welcome both Dr. Bomby and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Dr. Litvak, is that correct?
Yes, Richard. Thank you for having me. Perfectly pronounced.
Thank you, sir. It's great to have you. Dr. Bomby, you with us?
Yes, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with my introduction, Dr. Bomby, am I right? It just feels like I've never had so much confidence over the last year as I do now because of what's happening in my small neck of the world. And yet I open the paper, I turn on the TV, and I see other parts of the world are on fire. What kind of problems or challenges does that create for us?
First of all, I'm elated to have Dr. Frank Litvak. Richard is a fountain of knowledge. He was my cath lab director when I was training at Cedars, and because he belonged to the bigger world, he left practice of medicine to develop more improvisations that can improve the health for the rest of the world. He has been a source, backbone actually for developing the technologies like stents, congestive heart failure treatments, even stem cell. So he's a friend and a mentor. So that's the qualification that I love the most in him. He is the reason I am halfway good. So thank you, Dr. Litvak, for coming and joining us.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us, Dr. Litvak. Yeah.
My great pleasure.
And,
thank you, Dr. Bomby.
Answer your question pertaining to the continuing flames that engulf the world and our relative oasis or sanctuary. That relative sanctuary doesn't mean a whole lot. We can't lull ourselves into complacency and somehow perceive that we vanquished the enemy. Now it's terrorizing the susceptible in faraway exotic lands. It's not so. The virus is reloading. The mutation that's disseminating the infection uncontrollably in India is called the double mutant. It actually has 13 mutations in it, but the double mutant is that it has copy-pasted two of the most evolutionary benefits to the virus. One includes its infectability. It's able to infect more people quickly. Second, it evades the immunity. So when you have a virus that's more infectious and evades the previous immunity, it's able to deliver more lethal consequences. Not too long ago, we were happy that India, as a third world country, has been able to avoid the disastrous consequences of the richer parts of the world, assuming that it was related to the younger age and maybe they had a higher infection rate and higher seropositivity. But the recurrence of infection in India at a rate that's going on now has really blown through those previous promises. It seems like this double mutant is able either to exceed the previous immunity and or the seropositivity that was previously ascertained wasn't a correct number. Either way, what it tells us is we are not over the hump. We are celebrating a hiatus in which we have created the vaccine and some behavior changes that's allowing us a relative low spread of infection, but there's no reason to celebrate prematurely. We need to be there in India, in Brazil, in Turkey, and sequence the next infectant mutant and curtail it through testing, tracing, and isolation, because that's the only way you're going to curtail the next more pernicious mutant that can come back and pierce through our perceived or acquired immunity. So I rest uneasy, Richard. I rest uneasy.
Yeah.
Winning a battle isn't winning the war. We won the battle locally, but even here now, and I'd love to hear Dr. Litvak's analysis on that, his commentary on that, that in this country, about 30% of the people 27% have both the dosages, about 40% have one. But in my part of the world, Richard, in Kern County, 18% have both, 30% have one. So we are hitting vaccine hesitancy. And I was looking through the numbers in LA County, where Dr. Litvak is, only 18% of the African American and Latinos males have taken the vaccine versus 47% of the women. So we're hitting a lot of barriers that include the gender barrier, that is political, cultural, religious, or whatever it is. So vaccine hesitancy will interfere with our aim to achieve herd immunity.
Yeah.
So I rest uneasy.
Yeah, Dr. Litvak, let's go to you. What is your view of that, this hesitancy? I understand there's lots of different reasons people could have political reasons. They could have, they don't believe in the science. You hear people say, well, it was rushed. I don't trust it. But these numbers are alarming, and particularly when you start breaking them down by demographic profile, so to speak. What's your take on that, and how dangerous is that?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I mean, I would begin by saying it's very sad is really what it is, because there was, over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, a movement to downplay the clinical efficacy and safety of vaccinations. And I think that began with the myth that autism might be associated with childhood measles, mumps, rubella vaccinations. The physician who published that original paper in The Lancet not only retracted it, but he went to jail for perpetuating that fraud. But a number of individuals, especially some celebrities, took it up and perpetuated the myth. Now we come into 2020 and 2021. We live in a deeply polarized country where people, even intelligent people, often don't know who to believe, hearing conflicting accounts of the treatments and options available, even from the same governmental agencies. And it's created confusion and fear. But if one looks back at the history of vaccination, vaccinations in general over the past century, actually they've been around since Edward Jenner, even back into the 18th century, 19th century, have been the single most important and effective intervention for the creation of public health. Measles, mumps, rubella, polio, which I remember as a little kid, smallpox, which is now eradicated. So the concept of vaccination for prevention is not new. This is not a new scientific concept. It goes back to Edward Jenner and the cowpox vaccine way back when. Even in colonial times, people were getting smallpox vaccinations. So the concept that they need more time and they don't understand the mechanism, this is really well established. Vaccines are actually extremely simple medical interventions. You give a piece of the virus, and that might be a dead virus, a piece of the viral protein, or in the more modern situations, some nucleic acid or DNA or an RNA, which makes in your own body a part of the viral protein. And your immune system then does what immune systems have been doing through million years of evolution. They create both antibodies, which we call humoral response, and cells, which we call cellular response, to that foreign agent. And it works. Mm-hmm. There have been hundreds of millions of people vaccinated with the COVID vaccines, and they're incredibly effective, especially even the J&J and AstraZeneca are quite effective, but the Pfizer and Moderna are astoundingly effective and astoundingly safe. More people probably get hurt by taking aspirin every day than by taking the vaccination. So it's really, Richard, a sad amalgam of 10 or 20 years of anti-vaccine propaganda superimposed on the politically polarized environment with so much disinformation and, let's call it what it is, fake news by parties. So I think that's just the sad state of affairs.
Yeah, we're talking to Dr. Frank Litvack, who's a guest of ours here on the Richard Bean Show. He's with Dr. Bridge Bombay, who comes on every Friday. Dr. Litvack, let's continue with you, if you will. A CDC advisory panel, this just broke here, has recommended that we resume using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, that has gotten a real black eye. A handful of women have come down with blood clots. And through an abundance of caution, it was taken off, and now it's being put on. Would you have any hesitancy in yourself in taking the J&J vaccine, and what can you tell us about that? Because it is different. It's a different formulation than the Moderna and Pfizer, correct?
Exactly. It's actually a different mechanism of action. So let's talk about the J&J vaccine. The J&J vaccine is a living virus called an adenovirus, which has been stripped out of its genetic material that allows it to divide or replicate. So it can't reproduce itself. But they have placed in it a little piece of DNA that is in the virus. And when the virus gets into your cells, viruses, they come in and they hijack your cells. That's how they work. That little DNA that they put in there makes the spike protein, okay? And that creates the stimulus to your own immune system to say, hey, spike protein doesn't belong here. Let's attack. So it's a different mechanism. It's not quite as effective as the RNA vaccines of Pfizer and Moderna, but it's very effective and it's very safe. So to answer your question, I would not hesitate to take the J&J vaccine. I'm very pleased that the CDC, and I hadn't heard this, must have just hit on the wire, has reaffirmed the use of the vaccine. I probably would not recommend it, and I don't know what the CDC put out a few minutes ago. I would probably not recommend it for premenopausal women or for women on the birth control pill. The reason being that it is slightly higher incidence of these bad, nasty clots in veins all over the body than would occur in non-vaccinated. When I say slightly, it looks like it's reported to be about 1 in a million. And we could always imagine that everything's underreported, so let's call it 3 in a million. Okay. Remember, getting on a commercial airline flight, your risk is probably about 1 in 2 million. So it's not that we don't take risks every day. The reason I personally, and I haven't seen the guidelines, would probably try to avoid it in premenopausal women or women on the birth control pill is that seems to be where the preponderance of these very rare events has been occurring. And physiologically, it is possible that the higher levels of estrogen and progesterone that we see in those groups of women might be associated with enhancing the risk, the very rare risk for clot, because we know that women on the birth control pill, even in normal times, do have a higher incidence of clottings. So that's always something we've known for decades now. So I would unhesitatingly take it. I probably would not take it if I were a 25-year-old woman on birth control. I would probably seek out the Pfizer or Moderna. Now, if I had no option and I couldn't seek out, unfortunately in California, we are blessed with wide availability of vaccines right now. I probably would take it if I couldn't get the others, because the risk of COVID, including the risk of clotting from COVID, as you know, clotting is a big problem in COVID patients, is many times higher than the very low risk of clotting from the vaccine per se. So that's kind of the way I would frame it, and I'd be interested to see what the CDC had to say about that.
Yeah. Did you say clotting that patients with COVID have, that clotting is one of the issues? I didn't know that.
Oh yes, Richard, absolutely. The sicker the patient, the more likely the risk of clotting. So let's focus on the hospitalized patients who have serious COVID. They have, depending on what source of literature you read, they may have a 15 or higher % risk of forming a blood clot in their legs or in their lungs or other places, including in their arteries during the COVID. And that's the result of a number of factors. First of all, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the virus that causes COVID, can directly infect the lining of arteries, the so-called endothelial cells. Think of them as the velvet that lines the inside of the arteries, and it can cause damage there. And when those linings are damaged, we can form clots, just like when you have a heart attack, there's a damage in the artery which forms a clot. And on the veins, like the veins of your legs, it also can cause clotting. So there's been a number of patients who have died from COVID merely as the result of serious clotting, either in the veins or in the arteries. That's why the current guidelines call for all hospitalized patients to be put on blood thinners prophylactically. And many people, although it's unclear as to whether this is appropriate, many doctors are treating outpatient COVID individuals by putting them on at least aspirin. There's no good data on that, but just intuitively they're doing that. So I think it's important, Richard, for your audience to realize that the very rare clotting with the J&J vaccine is still less, much less than the risk of somebody developing serious clotting should they become infected with the COVID virus.
Oh, there you go. That's fascinating. Thank you, Dr. Litvak. Let's go back to Dr. Bombi. We have a few minutes left. Dr. Bombi, we're in this situation where you have these hot spots in Turkey and India and Brazil, and yet we're lulled into some sense of almost complacency here. What can happen if we slow down here, if we don't reach herd immunity, and this virus continues to rage in other pockets of the world? What's the worst thing that can happen?
So, Richard, I'm going to try to package a few things quickly. First of all, patchy herd immunity will compel the virus to evolve. It will be under evolutionary pressure. There's a thing called evolutionary concurrence, that we have already seen that the virus is simultaneously developing the same mutations in different areas that help it infect more efficiently and evade the immunity more efficiently. So that's the real fear, that all our efforts will stand to null. We'll have to reinvent the wheel, which luckily we're at a much better place because of the platform technology through the messenger RNA and the DNA virus vaccines. The second thing I'd like to emphasize is, even though we assume that we are intelligent human beings, we are very susceptible. The social media actors, especially the malicious actors from our friendly countries like Russia and China, they really hack into our thoughts and they control our mind. We should be mindful of the fact that the theories that are aligned with the flag and with the Bible are actually malicious theories, a lot of times promoted by malicious actors. They use our patriotism and our religion against us by trying to seed doubts about what's necessary to be done. The last thing I'd like to say is the vaccine hesitancy is best rejected in doctors' offices. As I've said repeatedly, the best place to administer vaccine is a doctor's place because there is a longitudinal trust there. I would like to reiterate, and that's the only way we're going to defeat the wall of vaccine hesitancy that's remaining. There's a lot to be said, and I hope Dr. Litvak comes back again and we can talk a little more about it.
Well, I'd love to. Dr. Litvak, I want to thank you for coming in. That's Dr. Frank Litvak, who's a friend of Dr. Bridge Bomby's. He used to be at Cedars, head of the Cath Lab, and he now is a healthcare entrepreneur. Dr. Litvak, a sincere thank you on behalf of the show for coming on. And Dr. Bomby, always great to have you. I hope you guys have wonderful weekends. Dr. Litvak, can I get you back on sometime?
I would love to. You know, I've been listening to your show when Dr. Bomby's on it, and I really enjoy it. It would be my great privilege to come back.
That'd be terrific. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And Dr. Bomby, always great talking to you, my friend.
Thank you, Richard. You have a good weekend, and see you next week.